Hello everybody, this is Ironside with my comprehensive video guide to character creation in Unreal World, meant for version 3.30. This is the video counterpart to my text guide, which I've posted to Steam and to the game's forums. Unreal World is a survival roguelike set in a version of Iron Age Finland. It's a roguelike in that everything's procedurally generated, so nothing will happen the same way twice. And if you die, you're dead and the game's over. It's a survival game in that you're not facing off hordes of monsters or working towards some great quest. What you're mainly doing is trying to carve out a piece in the world for your survivor, for your character to live in, and not starve to death and not freeze to death, both of which are very real and pervasive threats throughout the game. It's very much a game about setting your own challenges, to setting a goal for your character and seeing whether you can guide your character towards that goal. You can make it as difficult as you like, and you can make it relatively straightforward if you're learning the game or you just want to have a quiet meditative experience. Because character creation is the thing which makes the biggest difference to how difficult your game is, I've decided to go through this game, through character creation step by step, to allow you to make informed decisions about it at every step of the way. I will be rolling up an example character. The kind of character we'll be rolling up is one that's very good for newer players because it's well equipped to handle the challenges that the game faces you with. So let's get started. The first decision you have to make is with what kind of character creation you will be doing. You've got four options. You've got quick and easy, which is your one-click solution. Quick and easy just randomly generates every part of the character for you and puts you in the part where you start to control your character in the game. It makes this guide redundant, so I won't be saying anything more about it. Custom is the mode almost everybody uses. It's where you have input at every stage of character creation and you get to tailor the character and this experience for the game depending on what you would like. The difference between custom easy, and custom too easy is that the last two allow you in the skill assigning phase of character creation to take points that you receive by default away from some skills and redistribute them towards others. The reason this makes the game easier is because it allows you, if you know what you're doing, to min-max your character, take away points from skills that are of marginal use, which you can easily increase on your own, and add them to skills which is extremely valuable to have high scores in right at the beginning of the game. I will be choosing custom too easy just to show you what difference this makes, but my character won't actually have any of the benefits. I won't actually take away points from any of the default assignments I get. You get to make a decision what your character is called. I like to give all of my characters finish names because I'm that kind of person. In my text guide I have links to where you can find lists of good finish names and also a script which will generate an appropriate name for you depending on where in the game you want to play. Because the NPCs in the game have different names depending on whether they're in the north, the east or the west of Unreal World. The name I'm choosing is Red Kiopas because that's tour guide in Finnish, and that's what we'll be doing here. I'll be leading you through a short tour through character creation and the early stages of Unreal World. This is the first really significant choice you have to make for what kind of game you will be playing, and that's a choice of the starting culture. In Unreal World there are 10 different starting cultures. These are subgroups of the people inside of Unreal World, and all of them are a little bit different from each other. All of these cultures are distinct in some way. They split into three broad groups. There are the Eastern cultures, the Kalmalainen, the Kiesalainen, and the Rimelainen. There are the northern groups, the Seal tribe, the Quaker tribe, and the Owl tribe, and there are the western groups, the Driekelainen, the Sartulainen, the Koivulainen, and the Islanders. The eastern groups are the strongest. They have the best physical stats to start off with, especially strength and endurance, and their skills lean towards woodworking, hunting and trapping, and working hides. The northern tribes are not as strong. as the Eastern tribes, but they are faster and quicker and more agile. Their skills are also hunting and trapping, but they have almost no building skill because many of them live nomadic existences. They live in tents, kota they're called, which are made from animal hides stretched over wooden frames. So they don't have building skills, they don't have agriculture skills. They do tend, especially the Seal tribe, who are specialist fishers, and the Quaker tribe, they tend to have very high fishing skill because they do a lot of fishing off of the coast. The Western tribes, they are actually quite challenging to play because they have very bad starting statistics. And even though they get some bonuses to their starting statistics, the main determinant to what your skills are like at the beginning, even though they get some bonuses to your starting skills, the main determinant to what skills you get at character creation are what your stats are. And their stats are so bad that they're also low skilled characters. Islanders are decently playable because they've got very good fishing skill and the stats to back that up, but the rest of them should be left to challenge games. However, in the setting of Unreal World, these are the traders, so the villages in the West and of the Western cultures are larger and more prosperous than the villages you find elsewhere. They have the people who have the most trade, especially the Drekalainen. You can buy anything you want in the Drekalainen territory except for culture-specific items. I will be talking about them a little later on. The choice I will be making is Kaimalainen. The Kaimalainen are commonly considered the easiest character type to play because they have such extremely good starting statistics. They have the highest average strength, for instance, and they just have very good physical stats across the board, even dexterity, which is their worst stat. I have a chart here which I've taken from a guide I linked to in my text guide about what the starting statistics like, the range of starting statistics are like for all of the various cultures. What it does here is it shows you what the average is between 0 and 18, 18 being the maximum score for each group, what the best one is. So the person ran this number at the bottom, so 140 for the Kaimalainen tests, and the one which had the highest sum of all of the stats they put there, and you see the Kaimalainen have the highest score there, 169. That's 169 out of a possible, was that 180? 100 out of a possible 198. They got 168 points, and this shows the maximum possible scores you can get. You can see the Kaimalainen can have the maximum possible score except for 1 point off of intelligence and 1 point off of speed. So these people are, Kaimalainen are often considered something like superhumans in the game because, again, your starting stats are the main determinant of what your starting skills are. They also tend to be surprisingly high skill characters, even though they have few built-in skill bonuses. Owl Tribe are also a very popular starting culture, and the reason for that is because they have really good all-round skills. They in fact have a higher average than they have. In the tests the person ran, the Owl Tribe had highest stats all throughout, but not all the stats are equally important. These ones at the bottom, they're to do more with crafting, except for eyesight, which also matters for combat a little bit, but mainly for seeing what the world around you, being aware of the world around you. So the Owl Tribe get very high stats in everything except strength. And strength is important enough that most people prefer playing Kaimalainen to Owl Tribe unless they're playing a challenge. I'll talk more about the exact influence of all of the statistics a little later on. So what I'll be doing is I'll be rolling Kaimalainen because they are normally considered the easiest. Your choice of sex and of portrait is entirely cosmetic, makes no difference to the gameplay, so I'm just choosing the first options available. Your choice of a starting culture is really significant. Again, this is a survival game. The challenges you face are mainly to make your way through a really quite hostile and wild environment. And the environmental challenges are the most pervasive ones that you face during the game. The thing to really talk about here is winter time. Winter time is, as it were, the end game of Unreal World. There isn't anything like an overarching questline, but most people consider taking a character through the winter into the next year's spring is winning a game. There's no reason to stop playing after you've gone through one year. You may have a project that will take longer than 1 year to complete, but winter is really the point at which you know whether your character has what it takes to survive in the game or not. Winter is really quite challenging to play because of the depth of the weather and climate simulation in Unreal World. During winter, snow covers everything, which slows you and everybody else down. There's lots of ice everywhere, so most of the water is frozen over. All of the plants, except for trees, have died under the covering of snow. There are fewer animals around. They've either migrated away or are hibernating, and there's no plants for you to forage because you can't eat tree bark and branches. So you can start in winter, but most people do that as a challenge. If you can do one of the more difficult starting scenarios, starting in winter with a low-powered character, then you've shown that you can handle pretty much anything the game can throw at you. The rest of the game, for most of us, involves setting ourselves up so that we're prepared come the winter time. For that reason, spring seems like a logical option to start, and it's my favorite time of the year to start, because that gives you the most time before winter. Spring's also the only season which gives you a realistic chance of being able to set up some agriculture before winter starts, so that gives you time to prepare some fields and plant them such that the crops will grow and can be harvested before the winter kills them off. I won't be talking much about agriculture. It's very much a mid-game element, something to do once your survival really is quite established in the world, but it's something to bring into consideration. That said, spring has its own challenges. When you start, you're still in early spring, and that means that there's still a lot of snow on the ground and most of the water is still frozen. Right? Things are warming up, but it's not warm yet. There's not as many animals. They're starting to appear again, but there's still no plants to forage. Also, you'll be going through the spring thaw, the period where all the frozen water starts to melt, and this is one of the most dangerous times of the year. The reason is that you can fall through thin ice quite unpredictably, and this can be disastrous for a character. I've lost more than one character because I was carrying something heavy, say the meat from a successful hunt, and that cracked the ice underneath me, and then I fell in, and because I was laden down with all these things, I couldn't get out, and I just froze to death or drowned before I could get out. It's not a very nice way to go. This is the kind of game, that's the kind of game Unreal World is. For that reason, summer is probably the easiest starting time. In summer, you have still plenty of time to prepare for winter. You can even grow 1 or 2 crops before they get killed off by the winter if you're really quick about it. Most of the animals are running around. The first plants you can harvest are available. So summertime's pretty great. There is a challenge to summertime, and that's because in the heat of the summertime, the food you have spoils a lot quicker than it does in any other time of the year. This is especially important if you're hunting. If you manage to bring down a large animal like a reindeer or an elk, you will have anywhere between 90 to 250 pounds of meat from the hunt, depending on how large the animal is. Which is a lot of food, and it's bonanza, and it's great, except that meat will start to spoil within 2 or 3 game days. That was a really nasty surprise for me when I managed to kill a big elk in the summer, and I ended up with 220 pounds of inedible meat, because once the meat spoils, you can't eat it. It will make you sick, and it really isn't useful for almost anything. So what you have to do if you catch a big animal during the summer is you either need to preserve the food, or, which is more viable for a starting character, go to a village and trade the meat for something worthwhile. It is possible to preserve food in this game. You can either dry it or smoke it or salt it. Drying, however, you can only do in the period between late autumn, including winter, and early spring, because for the rest of the year the weather's too humid to dry things out of door. You can smoke food, but that requires you to build a smokehouse, a small cabin with a fireplace, and that takes a lot of time. You need to chop down a lot of trees and to turn that into a small building, which can take weeks in game. So it's not something that a starting character is likely to be able to do. And you can salt your food. However, because the water around Finland isn't actually salty, the seawater isn't salty, it's fresh or brackish at most, it's very hard to get salt through the usual ways in Finland. And this is modeled in the game. You can only get salt by trading for it, and salt's quite expensive. So it's something that a starting character might struggle to have. So handling large amounts of food in summer is a challenge. That said, food is more available, so it's more a matter of not getting the maximum efficiency out of the food you've managed to gather, rather than not being able to gather food at all, which is the problem in winter. Autumn time would have been the easiest time to play if it wasn't for the fact that it was just before winter, because in autumn time all the plants in Unreal World are bearing fruit and are ready for harvest, right? So there's lots of berries, there's lots of mushrooms, and there are herbs and roots that you can dig up and eat. It's in fact possible to survive during autumn without doing any hunting or fishing, which is something to keep in mind if you want to make a challenge where your character is a vegetarian, say, which is a really difficult challenge in this game. One of the reasons it's difficult is because a lot of the plant material is not very nutritious. Berries are the worst. In fact, with berries, if you eat only berries, your stomach gets full before you have enough nutrients to survive. So eating only berries will actually slowly starve your character. But roots and some of the crops give you enough nutrition to survive. There's still a lot of animals around, and many of them start to have their winter furs on. The winter furs are thicker, which makes them both more useful for you. They different thickness furs hold out both cold and certain kinds of damage, like bludgeoning damage, better, so they're more protective, and they're more valuable to trade. So the winter furs are pretty good. So autumn time's a pretty good time to be around. The late autumn, the snow starts to build up on the ground and starts to look a lot like winter. The water starts to freeze over, and then you lead into the most difficult time of the year. That said, a well-prepared survivor can do very well in winter time, because the people in Unreal World have learned to handle winter much like the Finns in real life have done. When you have skis on and there's snow everywhere, you move faster than anything else in the game except some birds. This means that while wildlife is trotting through the snow very slowly, you can scoot around on skis, shoot them with bows or throw javelins at them, and the animals that you do find, you will probably find quite easy to hunt if you are well prepared. If you have a shelter, a place where you can warm up, lots of firewood, lots of food so that you don't need to depend on animals you run into, if you've got lots of smoked or dried or salted food ready, you can do very well in winter. Another way in which winter is good is that there is a group of humans in the game who are enemies. They won't ever talk to you, they'll only attack you, and those are the Nyepizit, who live in the southeast of Unreal World. The thing about the Nyepizit is that they're foreign slavers. They wander throughout Unreal World and they attack, especially people on their own, and they will either kill you or your player character, or they will enslave some people like NPCs. Nyepizit have better armor than you do, and they have better weapons than you do because they've got more metal items available. However, they are not as well equipped for winter as you are. They don't have skis, for instance. So what happens is, even though you don't have the same quality equipment as they do, and quite possibly you won't be as skilled at using the equipment as they are, because many Nyepizit are extremely highly skilled adversaries, very good weapon skills, which make them very dangerous in a straight-on fight. You will be able to outmaneuver them and drive them away with hit-and-run tactics and the like, such that you're basically invulnerable if you're well prepared and you take the fight on your terms. I will be taking a summer start because I think it's the easiest one, and also because it allows me to show you most of the landscape. It won't be as covered in ice and snow. Right, here we come to rolling statistics. I've already shown you the chart earlier on about how the different cultures have different ranges of statistics that they can roll. I'll show this to you. This character, in fact, has quite mediocre stats for a calm alignment. They're normally much better. The strength is full and the intelligence is very high, which is nice, but the rest is pretty low. You can re-roll your character's stats as often as you like. There's no limit to it. Again, this is a game about setting your own challenge. You may decide a challenge is to take the first character that you roll, or the first character or the best out of 3 rolls, or you can just roll and get the kind of stats that you would like to play as. I won't be re-rolling too often. There's a couple of things that I will take consideration of, and which you probably should as well, and that's the convenience of playing characters with high strength and endurance. Strength also influences how much you can carry, not only the influence it has in the various skills, like your weapon skills, and this matters at times, like especially when you've got big hunts. It takes a character with almost full strength to be able to carry all the meat from, say, killing an elk. If you have a character who has only medium or bad strength, poor strength, you will have to take multiple trips to collect the meat. In that time, the meat will be rotting, so that's something to take into consideration. It also makes trading and building more slowly because it takes you longer to maneuver everything around that you want to trade or you want to build with. Endurance, similarly, has to do with how many things you can do before your character tires, and most people won't play a character unless it has at least half endurance, preferably more, just because of the convenience factor of having a trooper who's willing to push through and do the things that you want to do. Dexterity, agility and speed are a triad. They're shared across a lot of skills, and they have to do with things like using bows, which are very important. So lots of people like to have this very high. Eyesight is important for your character's awareness of the world around you. Hearing as well, but eyesight much more, because in the zoomed out overworld map, characters with lower eyesight won't see all of the creatures, all of the animals or other people around them on the map as well as other characters do. It's also important for some weapon skills, and especially your bow skill. Hearing, smell and taste are mainly to do with crafting. If I were to play this character would be something like a very good carpenter and a hide worker. Though I'd have to use traps to catch animals. Because of that kind of dexterity, I won't be able to hit them with a bow. They have to do with your crafting skills. Lots of people are happy to play characters with very low ones. It just means that their food won't be as good, and it will take them longer to learn decent hide working and the like. That's low intelligence, but the rest of this is really good. You see that the dexterity is the lowest skill that Carmelina normally have. One more skill, talk about speed. Speed influences your walking speed across the map, and that makes a big difference for instance, hunting down animals, your ability to chase down animals. I don't want to bore you by doing this too much, so yeah, okay. At this screen you don't really have any input in the game. What happens here is rather the game tells you which rituals your character starts with. There are 16, I think, rituals, maybe 14 rituals throughout the game, which influence your gameplay, either by making your activities more rewarding, give you better results in the things that you do. Hunting incantation is one of those. Or by influencing your relationship to nature and to the spirits that your character believes in, like Safety of the Night does. The ones that make your skill better are ones like the extremely useful favorableness of the trap ritual, which makes animals more likely to walk into your traps. Hunting incantation, if you say it early in the morning, will make it more likely that you run into large animals to hunt during the day. Safety of the Night makes you sleep better. There are also other kinds of rituals like sacrifice for a newly killed animal, that once you've killed an animal you take one piece of meat from the animal and you sacrifice it, and that improves your relationship with the spirits in the other world, so that you're not just taking from nature but occasionally giving something back. There are certain activities which worsen your relationship to nature, killing animals, cutting down trees, that kind of thing, and through using these rituals you can mitigate that damage. You learn new rituals as you play the game when your relationship to nature is especially good or especially bad. In that case, you become aware that there's a ritual that you could do. Then you need to track down a shaman or a sage who will teach you the incantation, and that's the way that you learn your rituals in the game. Again, you don't have a choice here, it just tells you which ones you start with. The different cultures have different pools of rituals that they can start with. You always start with 2, but every character can learn every ritual in the game. I've never struggled to learn every ritual in the game. I normally, if I start in spring, I will have learned every ritual by late summer or early autumn. The next step is another important one, and that is determining your skills. As I said earlier, the biggest determinant of what your starting skills are like is what your starting statistics are like. Because my character has quite high strength and dexterity and these, my weapon skills are all quite high and have all got these 3-star ratings. These ratings aren't how good they are at the beginning, but how easy it is for you to learn them through playing the game. So characters with high stats tend to have everything 2s or 3s here, which means that they can improve the skills through gameplay relatively easy. There's one exception to that, dodge, which is why it has this red slash here. What dodge never improves, never changes during the game. The only dodge is entirely determined by what your stats are. I think it's agility, speed, and eyesight. That determines your dodge score. It never improves, it never degrades, it's always fixed to that. It can improve if you manage to improve your stats, but there's only one way you can do that through the game. You can only do it once. This number, this letter here, that is the skill, the key that you use to use the skill. So for instance, if you want to cook something, you press Alt-C, there's a menu that appears, and then you follow one of the cooking options. This game's really old school in that way. This is how all the games were in the 90s, which is when this game started to be made in 1992. Your skill has a rating out of 100, just straightforwardly between 0 and 100. Quite a few cultures, like northern cultures, will start in 0s in agriculture because they don't do any farming, and swimming because the water's too cold to swim. But and sometimes you will start with 0s in things like crossbow or flail, which are pretty marginal use skills, which most cultures don't traditionally use. I'll quickly tell you something about which skills are useful and why. The skills I take on every character, unless I'm doing something very particular, is fishing, hide-working, trapping, spear, and bow. Here's the reasons I take those. Fishing is one of the reliable ways you can have food in Unreal World. There's water everywhere. Finland's full of lakes, and so is Unreal World, and the coasts, of course, have fishing as well. That said, you need to have quite a high fishing rating to make it worthwhile to try and survive by fishing. If you have a fishing rating like this, around 50%, you probably need a fishing rod to be able to catch enough food to be able to survive. If you don't have a fishing rod and you try to fish using a spear, you'd want something in the 60 to 70% range, and even then you won't succeed, even if you spend the whole day fishing. If you do a really desperate way to catch fish, which is try to hit them with stones, which you can do in the game, and you can do it in real life, but you really need a fishing skill over 70 plus or so to be able to do that with any regularity. If you try to fish and you don't have a high enough fishing skill, you're just starving really slowly because your catches won't be often enough. You can also get nets and lay nets, and the requirements for being successful with fishing with nets is much lower. A character in the 30 or 40% can do that, but you need to have quite a bit of equipment set up to be able to fish with nets. Or you can do what I do and start with the appropriate scenario. Hide working is a skill that has to do with your ability to turn the hides that you take off of animals you've killed and turn them into fur and leather. This is not a skill that's vital for survival. You can do everything you need to in the game, even with really poor quality fur and leather, but it's very, very, very useful to have high. For one thing, it's quite slow to improve. The only way you can prove it is practicing it, and practicing requires more animal skins to work with, which means that you need to kill an animal before you get another hide that you can practice on. Also, hides are really useful. Fur and leather is really useful. It's lots of things you make out of fur and leather, especially clothing, and you need warm clothing to survive the winter. Also, fur, especially fur from certain prestige animals like bears, beavers, badgers, and especially Arctic foxes. They are very valuable trade goods. Lots of the things in the game you can't make yourself, like most metal items, and all metal items you can't make yourself. You need to either loot it from somebody or trade for it. And the best metal equipment you get from roving bands of foreign traders. They're little men wearing blue that wander around Unreal World. And they sell things like metal weapons and metal armor. The only things they will take in trade for metal weapons and metal armor are furs, and they especially want fox furs, which they go back to their home nations and trade. Trapping is a very valuable skill because just like fishing, it's a reliable way to get food in the long run. Ultimately, you will get most of your food through traps that you've set up. There's a thing called a trap fence where you set up a long fence with gaps in between the fence, and then you set pit traps in between the gaps. So what happens when animals meet the fence, they walk around along it until they find a gap. They try to move through the gap, but then fall into the trap. And that's your most reliable way to get food in the long run. You don't need a high trapping skill to succeed, but it makes your successes much more regular and much more dependable. And again, for this game, you want to have a dependable source of food. You don't just want to have a success every now and then. You need to have successes often enough to stop your character from starving. And trapping is ultimately the most reliable way to do that. Although fishing is a more effective way to get food in the very, very early game. Partly because you don't get enough fish for it to spoil. Your fish doesn't come in packages of 90 or 150 or 200 pounds. It comes in packages of 3, 4 or 7 pounds, which you can eat easily before it goes off. Everybody needs to have a weapon skill of some kind, one of the combat skills, unless they're playing a very particular kind of challenge game. And the reason for that's not because of fighting, but because of hunting. So for most characters, you want to have a high bow skill. The reason you want to have bow is because bow is ultimately all around the most effective hunting skill. You don't need to get right next to an animal to kill it with a bow, and bows can be really, really effective. That said, range combat in Unreal World is quite difficult. I find that shots more than 5 tiles away, so it's about 10 meters away, start to become really iffy to hit, even if you have a very high skill. I like to fire my bow from 3 squares away. Even 2 is better, where you can do a lot of damage. And you will find that not needing to make up those last 2 squares when you're chasing an animal makes a really big difference. It makes an especially big difference when you do combat against other humans. So bow is a skill which every character should at least consider, and it's very handy to have high. It's also, all the weapon skills are tedious to improve. You can improve them, but you need to practice them, and practicing either takes an opponent or just idly using it for a long time. Spear is my favorite melee skill. The reason is because spear is a very good all-round skill. The spears themselves are very effective melee weapons, but you can spear skill also governs use with javelins, which are quite effective range weapons. They don't have the range of bows, but they do really heavy damage, and they're very good for using against animals in that way, to bring down a large animal. They're also quite effective in combat. Spears are also easy to find. You can make a javelin even if you have got just a knife. You cut down a young tree, you cut through a sapling, as it were, and you craft it into a javelin. So you can have spears right from the beginning of the game. There are reasons why you might not want to take spear. The most effective spears require 2 hands to use, which means that it's going to be clumsy to change your weapon. So changing from a spear to a bow all the time is clumsy because bow needs 2 hands and spear needs 2 hands. There are also weapons that are more effective as specialist weapons, either specialist animal hunting weapons where you don't hurt the hide as much, those would be clubs, or specialist anti-human weapons like swords, one of the flails, the wolf flail, and the iron mace underneath the sword. Those are more specialized weapons than spears. Shield is worthwhile to consider having, because the most dangerous other humans you will be facing will be bowmen or crossbowmen, who can kill you from before you're in range to hurt them. Your only effective defense against this is either running away and making yourself as difficult to target as possible, or having a shield. So shield's valuable for that reason. It's also a valuable defensive thing to have in any fight. So those are weapon skills you might want to consider. Clubs, I will say, are also a good option, because you will always have, it's very easy to have a clubs, even easier than having a spear. And clubs are really effective against animals, because you don't hurt the hides when you kill the animal, which is something to consider. If you don't hurt the hide, you can get a better fur or leather from it. Maces are also specialist anti-human weapons which use the club skill, so that's good. Also, for some reason, using stones, like throwing rocks or hitting somebody with a stone, uses the club skill, so you always have a club weapon somewhere close to you. Axe is also a useful skill which some people like to use, because you very often will have an axe with you. A hand axe is a very handy tool that you will be carrying around a lot of the time, and you also use axes to do building or to chop down trees. So you will normally have an axe, you will often have an axe on you, and it will be handy to have a decent weapon skill with axe, because you're having one with you. Some of the weapon skills are not generally worthwhile to improve. They come in two kinds: flail and crossbow, which are too marginal for most characters, and unarmed and knife, which are just not, they just don't do enough damage to be worthwhile. They're too hard to use. Flails and crossbows can be extremely effective weapons. You can make a grain flail for threshing, but you'd really want a war flail, which you can buy either from the Drek in the southwest, or more likely from foreign traders. However, most characters start with a very low flail skill, and it's tedious to improve. Same with crossbow. Crossbow can be extremely effective, and you will easily buy one from the Drek in the southwest. But most characters, even Drek, start with really low crossbow skills, and it's tedious to improve. Bows are so effective that crossbows probably aren't worth it. Same with flails. They're very effective, but the other skills are super effective as well. Of the specialist anti-human weapons, swords probably are the most popular, and the reason is because swords are quite easy to find. Drek and foreign traders almost always have swords available for sale, and of the Nyatbezit that you will meet wandering around, almost all of them carry swords. So you can either trade for one from the Drek or foreign traders, or you can ambush and kill a Nyatbezit and loot theirs. So swords are the most plentiful of the specialist anti-human weapons. Knife and unarmed are normally not worth taking, because they suffer from range penalties. You suffer penalties during fighting because they're such short range. And while a knife can do damage, unarmed you will struggle to do damage unless you've got a very high skill. Armor is a consideration in the game, and the damage from unarmed sometimes will struggle to get even through the thick fur of large animals. Knives can do damage, but everything else does more damage. So I never take these, but you might want to do it if you have a particular kind of character in mind, or if you want a challenge. The physical skills are normally not worth spending your points in. The reason is because they increase on their own really quickly, such that with skiing, for instance, by the time you've gone through one winter, your skiing skill will be almost full. It just happens on its own. Stealth can be really handy to have high, but it's relatively easy to train. And your most effective way of hunting isn't actually to sneak up on things. Your most effective way of hunting is to get as close as you can by sneaking, but once they start running away from you, you just follow them. Animals are faster than you, but most humans have high endurance than the animals, especially if you follow my advice and don't roll a low endurance character. And you just track and track and track the animal until they're too tired to run away from them. Then you walk up and kill them. This is the way lots of people hunted in the past. It's called endurance or persistence hunting. That's your most effective way of hunting, not sneaking up on animals. So stealth isn't super as important as you may think it may be, although it's always really handy to have high. Climbing is really handy to have high, but really trivial to improve. Of the lore and craft skills, I've said why some of these I really like, hardworking, fishing and trapping. Other ones that you might want to spend your bonus points in are timbercraft, because you will spend quite a bit of time chopping down trees and turning them to wood, and Timbercraft a skill for that. It makes a difference with how long you take to do things. Also, Timbercraft makes a difference with how good quality boards you make once you cut down a tree and split it into boards being planks, really. Boards turn out to be the most effective trade good, or at least they're the most valuable thing for the least amount of time that you spend. But that will only do you any stead if you have a decent Timbercraft skill, otherwise the boards you make will be too poor quality to sell. Physician is a worthwhile skill to consider using a bonus point in, because Physician is your ability to heal yourself of wounds. Wounds are a serious problem. If you suffer from a wound, it gives you a percentage point malus penalty, and that penalty is global. All of your skills are affected by that penalty. So if you're like 13% wounded and my character has a 52% hardworking skill, that will only be a 39% hardworking skill because of the extent to which the injury hurts me. You don't need a high physician skill. Shamans and sages and villagers will be able to help you heal up, but it's a very handy one to have high, and it's very difficult to increase because again you need wounds to practice it, and intentionally trying to get wounds, unless you know exactly what you're doing, intentionally trying to get wounds is a really good way to get yourself killed. Another one to consider having a high, some people like to do it, is cookery. Cookery, you don't need a high skill, and it's really easy to train. But the thing about cookery is it influences how nutritious the food is that you eat. Food that is tasty or delicious is more nutritious than food that is bland or awful. And right at the beginning of the game is when you need your food to be the most nutritious, because you won't have been able to build up a store of food in a cellar in preparation for lean times. So some people like to bump up cookery for that reason, even though it trains naturally. I've told you which options I like. I'll also tell you which ones you probably shouldn't bump up, and those are, they start with agriculture. Agriculture, it makes a big difference if you have a high agriculture skill. A farmer with a high agriculture skill will produce much more food, get much better return from farming than someone with a low agriculture skill. However, your returns from farming, even with a very, very low skill, even a 0 skill, is more than enough to make it worthwhile. Right, the rest is just a bonus. So almost everybody can get by with a mediocre agriculture skill, or even a 0 skill. Building's another one which is nice to have, but probably not worthwhile to bump up, because building only influences how long it takes you to build something. The end result's the same, right? But it takes a less skilled character longer to get to the appropriate quality building. And the thing is, you just don't spend that much of your game building. So even if you bump up your building skill a lot and you shave off 100 or 200 hours with how long it takes you to build a house, it just doesn't make that big a difference in the larger scale of things. The other things you can spend your skill points in are much more impactful. Skills like herb lore and weather lore just don't have enough impact to be worthwhile improving, especially herb lore, because it's easy to train. Herb lore is your ability to identify plants around you, which can be really handy because many plants have medicinal properties, and herb lore allows you to recognize those medicinal properties. But it's really easy to train. You just pick an unidentified plant or pick some leaves from it, keep it in your inventory and look at it once an hour or so, and that will give you a lot of training in herb lore. So I never spend something like this unless I'm doing a very particular kind of character. Ritual influences the time it takes you to learn a new ritual. It's probably not worth bumping up. There is one mod that makes extensive use of herb lore and ritual, but that mod you should only consider playing, the shaman mod, if you've become very comfortable with the game and don't need guides like this anymore. Weather lore just is your ability to predict what the weather would be like. It's not really worthwhile. Carpentry is a skill maybe I've given some short shrift to. Carpentry is your ability to carve things out of wood, and it's famously tedious to train. You will carve hundreds and hundreds of wooden bowls to get noticeable improvements in carpentry. Wooden carpentry is your best trade goods for a starting out character if you don't have an axe or you have very bad timbercraft. So carving wooden mugs and wooden bowls is a good trade good for you to. If you don't have an axe, you've only got a knife, and you have wood. Actually, you can't get things to carve with carpentry with just a knife, so ignore what I've just said. Carpentry used to be much more useful as a trade group, but now timbercraft's overtaken it. Bump it if you like, but it just doesn't make that big a difference. So those are the skills. I will show you another chart from the same guide that I had used earlier, and that shows which statistics influence which skills. There's not much to see here. I must admit I haven't never bothered to look at this chart in a lot of detail, but it gives you a broad overview. You see that agility is really useful for your weapon skills and your movement skills, int for your lore and crafting skills, touch and smell is really important for your crafting skills, and strength for your weapon skills. You can see that, and you can also see which kinds of cultures have the best average stats in those skills and the best maximum stats in those skills. So if you want to make a specialist character, say specialist fisherman, this chart will tell you that an islander, Quaker tribe or Seal tribe member is somebody you should probably consider if you want to play a specialist fisherman. Right. The way assigning skills work is you get 5 bonuses to spend. I've already used 4 of them here, and if I use the 5th one, the game asks me whether I want to keep it. I don't want to yet, I've got more to show you. The more I want to show you is if you choose the custom easy option, you can take skills away. So if you believe me that a skill like unarmed is really not useful, or crossbow or flail, then you can take away points from crossbow and flail and add them to skills that are super useful like spear and bow. Right. So custom easy allows you to take 1 step away, and custom too easy allows you to take 2 steps away. You can see, by the way, when you've reached past the point of your character's default, because that's what the lighter color part of the bar is. So you can see the lighter color part in trapping, hardworking, and fishing shows the size of the bonus I received by spending it. You don't get the same bonus every time, but don't worry about the mathematics. You can look it up. It's in the guide that I described earlier, but it's just not that effective, that important. The lower your skill, the faster you train it, right? So this character with 80% spear skill will spend a lot longer practicing to improve spear than he would to improve his sword skill by 1 point, for instance. Okay, so the difference between with easy and too easy is how you can redistribute. I don't actually want to redistribute, so I'm happy with this character like this. You see, this character has really high bow skill, really high spear skill. Thank you, Lion and Superman. It's got a decent fishing skill. I'd have liked it higher. I'd have liked it 60% or more, but you know, them's the breaks. This character will be easy enough as it is. Decent hardworking and not great trapping, but it's enough for a start. Okay. Now we get to one of the points where the random generation matters quite a lot, and that is with the way the map is. The map is different every single time. However, the generator is weighted. It's set up in a way to give you broadly the same kind of landscape every time. So you won't have, say, the same island every time, but you will have the same basic layout of the land every time. I'll quickly tell you about this layout of the land. Starting at the north coast, you see it runs basically straight east to west, and there's a mountain range just below it. There's a gap in this mountain range, and if I zoom in, right, to this gap in the mountain range, you will see there's a river that runs through it, right? Then there's this northwestern corner, a western coast. There are some rivers that run the western coast, and then you get to this archipelago in the southwest, all of these hundreds and hundreds of tiny islands and a mainland there. Then you've got the south coast, also with islands along them throughout, an inlet, and from this inlet you've got 2 rivers. One river that runs in here, occasionally crossing various lakes, and then this river that runs through 3 very large lakes interconnected with each other. These are what I call the central lakes, right in the middle of the game. So you will have broadly this kind of shape every time, down to that river is always there, those 2 rivers are always there, there's a river down here which is always there. But the mountain range is always there, and this gap's always there. But there's lots of things which aren't always there, like the these rivers placement changes and the exact size and location of the 3 maps and all of the 3 lakes and all of the lakes in between. Those are all randomly generated. What stays the same is the broad arrangement of the cultures. So I have here switched on the indicator, which shows me the territories of the 3 cultures. It's going to hide this box, but it shows you which the colors mean, right? So we have in the southwest the Islanders and the Drik. We have the Sartula on the west coast and the Koivala, so those are the western cultures. In the north we have the Seal tribe, where they always are on the northwest corner. We have the Khoikha tribe in this gap in the mountains where that river runs. We have the Owl tribe who occupy a large territory, but it's small villages a long way from each other, often a village of only 1 house or so. They're normally south of the mountains, heading towards these central lakes. There's sometimes also villages along the north coast. So those are the northern cultures. And with the eastern cultures, we have the Kiesa-Leinen, the Kalmu-Leinen, and on either side of the Great Lakes here, of the Great Central Lakes. The Kalmu are always along the first river, the river which doesn't connect to the lakes. And the Kiesa are always on the river and on the lakes, or to the west of them, the one that runs between the large lakes. The last culture we have are the Nyarpazit, and they're not playable, they're the foreign slavers that I told you about. You can find them all across Unreal World, but they're much more common closer to their own territory, and in their territory you will actually find Nyarpazit villages, which are the bases from which they set out, presumably to hunt down and enslave the people of Unreal World. I'll just randomly generate a few of these maps so you can see how the basic shape of the land and the arrangement of the cultures is different. Is the same. The territories differ slightly because the placements of the individual villages changes, and the territory is based around the villages of the cultures, but it's always in broadly the same place. You see the Islanders here, the Seal tribe there. Yeah, you see all of that. I'll tell you a little bit about how to read this map. Well, we have here these colored splotches. These are the villages. They are settlements, right? And you will see that in this case, the Kiesa-Leinen territory arranged around the villages. So those are the Kiesa-Leinen villages, and the territory is marked out by the territory is marked out by that. Other things to consider are these little black lines. They're roads between villages. In this case, roads in Koivala territory. Right? Roads are faster to travel on because they're always cleared. You don't need to dodge trees or rocks along the way. They only exist in the more settled areas. Right? So you can see here we've got roads in Drik, roads in Koivala. When we go to the northwest, we will see roads in Sartula. Right? You don't get roads in the Islander territory because you can't build roads between the islands, but you do find roads in Rimi territory. Right, so that's the random map generator. Something to say about the landscape in general. Animals like to avoid villages and to avoid lots of people, so you'll find more animals away from settlements. Because the southwestern corner, so basically this area here, because the southwestern corner is the most settled, you find fewer animals there. That said, I've never struggled to find enough animals to hunt, even when I've lived smack bang in the middle of Drik territory, which is the most settled, the largest villages, the closest together. But you will find many more animals to hunt in the northeast, where you see there's nobody here. That's why the Kiesa, the Kalmu in particular, live here. That's because there's the best hunting. However, the southwest is where the best trading is. So the most popular places to start, most popular is in Drik territory, or very close to Drik territory, because when we come to Drik territory, you can see there's lots and lots of towns very close to each other, and these towns are the ones with the most things to trade. Right? So living in or very nearby Drik territory, so you can do things like buy the axes that make building a house a lot quicker, buy the weapons that you like. The other option is to live in the northeast where the hunting's better. You could, if you want to play a fishing game, live in the northwestern corner or southwestern corner. The Seal tribe and the Islanders are both dirt poor, but they'll never go hungry because there's lots and lots of fish for them to catch and to live off of. And if you want to play that kind of game, those are good places to live. Those are also the archipelagos, the only place you find grey seals, so the archipelago and these islands here, and you find ring seals along the north coast, and especially this corner. So if you want to be a seal tribe person hunting fish and seal, that's where you live. The animals also differ a little, which ones you find where, because like I said, animals avoid humans, so they're less common in the southwest. Also large animals, like especially bears, like being in the caves that live around the northern coast here. Things like boars. I've never seen boars in the southwest, maybe they are around, but they're certainly quite common in the northeast. Certain lake waterfowl, like swans and so, you can find in the central lakes, and I don't think anywhere else. Yeah, so what kind of animals you want to face is a feature. So if you want to live like a nomad, like many of the northern tribes do, tracking game and hunting it around, play in the northeast, preferably relatively close to Common Island territory or our tribe territory, so at least have some people to trade with. Again, there are some things you can't make on your own. Or if you want a game, I would recommend playing with close to the Drek, so you can buy the things that you need. You choose where you play by following that brown splotch, that is your starting location. You can randomize the world and randomize the starting location as often as you like. You may want to randomize the world if it doesn't have a feature you like. For instance, I always look out to the size of Drek territory, and also this river which runs here, because it gives you an easy way to go from the coast by Drek into the interior once you have a watercraft. This suits me fine, so I'd like a starting location somewhere around here. You can, the starting location jumps around pretty much unconstrained, though you will never start in Nyarpa's territory, and you will never start in this no man's land here. But other than that, unconstrained. You can tell the generator that you want to start in your home territory by pressing H, and you see here, right, if I overlay the cultural indicator, it moves me around home territory because I'm rolling a home character. But I don't really want to start there. I'd really rather start, that's difficult. I'd really want to start close to the Drek. I don't want to re-roll too many times, so this suits me fine. It's close enough to the river I want to be in. There's at least one nearby Drek village. I'll move closer to the rest. So that's a perfectly fine place for me to start. Once you're happy, you press E, and in you go. Now comes the final few choices you have to make. The choice of a starting scenario and your choice of a game course. Your starting scenario is the main thing that determines the equipment that you start with, in that some of these scenarios add to your starting equipment and some of them take away. The Unreal world and the village just plonk you into the game world to start straight away. The Unreal village starts you in the wilderness, and the village starts you, I think it's by the closest village to your starting location. It just starts you there with whatever normal starting equipment character of your culture would draw from. I won't go into all of these in detail because that would take me a very long time. I plan to make another video where I describe all of the starting scenarios and give you a little bit of an introduction to them and play the first day or so of each of them. But for now, I'll just give you the broad outlines. Many of these are give you things that are very worthwhile, of which I want to be a fisherman is important, because this one gives you fishing nets. It gives you one fishing rod and two fishing nets right at the beginning. Fishing nets are the easiest way to get lots of food right in the beginning of the game. You do need to make a boat to be able to place fishing nets, so you need to make yourself a raft because you need to place them in deep water, but that doesn't take terribly long, and nets are a passive way to get lots and lots of food. You place a net and you check it somewhere in the next 40 to 50 hours. After 2 days, with a little bit of a grace period, any fish that you've caught die and become inedible, so you need to check it every 2 days. But you can get quite large amounts of fish that way while you go around and do other things like build a cabin or plant some fields or set up a trap fence or whatever. So I want to be a fisherman is probably the easiest start and the start I will end up using. Other starts we're considering is Lonely Settler. Lonely Settler doesn't give you anything that helps you with surviving, but it gives you 3 axes, a carving axe, a splitting axe and a broad axe. And these axes make building much faster because they're specialized for building work. There are 5 kinds of axes. There's also a hand axe, which is a general all-round one, and a woodsman's axe, which you use for felling trees. But the 3 specialist axes are the hardest ones to find, and Lonely Settler just gives them to you straight away, so that's very nice of it. The other scenarios give you various things, or give you various challenges. Of the challenging ones, I'll describe 3 of them. There will be robbers. Start you close to a group of robbers who ask you to give you most of your valuable things, or they threaten to beat you up really, really badly. You can either choose to run away or fight. Running away is probably the smart choice. The robbers don't disappear off the map, so you can come back later and take the fight on your own terms. But if I want a game where I want to try out my combat skills, I roll a There'll Be Robbers start, and I see whether I can take them. That said, even though I've played this a lot of times, I still end up losing most of my fights. Just because there are so many robbers and you can get overwhelmed really easy. Also, your fatigue level increases as you fight, as you become more tired. And just like injury, fatigue is a global penalty to your skill. So the more tired you get, the less effective your skill is. Runaway Slave starts you right in the middle of a Nyarpes camp. So a camp somewhere in the wilderness. Which the Nyarpes use as a slaving base. You start right in the middle of one, you've stolen a knife, and you're trying to run away. So what I like to do is I like to run out of the camp before the Nyarpes can kill me, because I have a knife and they have all of their equipment. Then I make myself some javelins and I come back in the night and I kill one of them, take what it's carrying, and then use that gear to set up the rest of my game. Hurt, Helpless and Afraid is the hardest start. It just starts you in the middle of the wilderness with a knife, a few bits of clothing, and lots of runes. It's very common to start with, say, a broken leg, which makes you much less effective. Characters who manage to win a game, to set up a game where you start with a Drick character, Hurt, Helpless and Afraid in the winter, have pretty much done the hardest thing that the game can ask them to do. I will be doing the fisherman start because I think that's the easiest start to start off with because of the fishing nets. Once I've taken the effort to make myself a boat, I will have a reliable source of food that takes very little input from me. It's a little bit of background, lore with the fish. And we get to the last decision we make, which is our game course that we select. The game course is an overarching series of tasks for you to complete. The first one of these is the I don't want to bother with the game course option. There's no extra tasks, so it doesn't matter. The second one, Living in the Wild, is the game's tutorial. It teaches you the things you need to know to be able to play the game. It teaches you the interface, and it teaches you how to do things like trapping, fishing, and agriculture. In the course of the tutorial, you will receive some free gear, which is a reason to do it if you want to give your character a helping hand. You will receive a hand axe, a fishing rod, a shovel. You will get fish to eat. You will get some seeds to plant. You will get an increase to your tracking skill just for playing through the tutorial. So that's something to keep in mind. I play almost all my games in Advanced Adventures. Advanced Adventures are a series of little challenges for experienced players. They're things like tracking down and hunting a bear, tracking down and killing a Nyarpes, going for a trading expedition to the southwest to buy some salt, going to a hunting expedition to the northeast to get a high value fur. Those are the kinds of things that you're asked to do in the Advanced Adventures game, just to give your character something to aim towards. I will be, for this character, doing Living in the Wild, because I want to show it off to you guys eventually. And here we go. This shows you a bit of the lore that goes on in the in-game encyclopedia. The in-game encyclopedia is searchable. So if you press spacebar, you can put in keywords, like for instance trap, and it will bring up the in-game encyclopedia, where you can look up deadfall traps and small deadfall traps, also called the lever trap, which is important because it's a trap you can make only using a knife. Right? You don't need to make any cords or ropes to use it. You cut down a sapling, you pick up a big rock, you take some branches, and you make yourself a trap that way. So that's really good for starting characters. And in the in-game encyclopedia, I can look up various kinds of animal, like grey seals, or I can look up elk, right? And it gives you all kinds of information about the things in the game. And here we are in Unreal World. Here's the game course, the Living in the Wild tutorial course starting up. As you see, it's teaching me how to do something in game. It's teaching me the relatively archaic control scheme for the game, but that doesn't matter. Here we are in Unreal World. We'll stop here, but I hope this is the point where you start to make your own decisions and actually start to play the game. I hope you have as much fun with Unreal World as I do. So this is your friends Irontide and Redkio Pass signing out. All the best.